The penthouse was silent at 3 a.m. except for the sound of a woman's breathing, shallow, afraid. Alone in a bed bigger than her childhood bedroom. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul sprawled like a glittering trap. Nylah Cole was 20 years old. And she had been awake for 40 hours straight because sleep meant nightmares, and nightmares meant remembering the moment her mother's hands let go. She wasn't supposed to be here. 5 years earlier, she had been a college student in Chicago. She had dreams. She had a scholarship. She had a mother who loved her and a father who worked himself to bone for her future. And then one phone call changed everything. Now lying in the dark of a penthouse that wasn't hers, wearing clothes chosen by a man she'd met once, Nylah understood something that no amount of therapy could undo. Some people are born into choices. Some people have choices stolen from them. And some people, girls like her, have to live with the ghosts of both. The man who had bought her was somewhere in this apartment. She could feel him the way prey feels a predator, not through sight, but through the air itself becoming dangerous. His name was Kang Jisung. He was 39 years old. He was called the Ghost King in circles Nylah was terrified to know about. And according to rumors whispered by the housekeeper when she thought Nylah was sleeping, every woman he'd ever married had disappeared. What nobody knew, not yet, was that Nylah Cole would be the one to make him testify. That years from now, she would stand in a courtroom and watch him answer for what he'd done. That she would tear the world apart to build something different on its ashes. That she would fall in love with him and she would hate herself for it and she would choose him anyway and that choice would change everything. But that was the ending. This is the beginning. Nylah Cole existed in the margins of other people's lives. That was the only way she knew how to survive. At Roosevelt University, she was the smart black girl from the South Side. In Korean language class, her secret obsession, she was the student who actually remembered the verb conjugations and could pronounce Busan without making the instructor wince. At the coffee shop where she worked weekends, she was the one who gets orders right, and didn't talk much, which meant customers trusted her, which meant tips, which meant her mom got new shoes that weren't from Goodwill. She was 20, with her mother's sharp cheekbones and her father's stubborn jaw. She wore her hair in braids most days, kept her nails practical, bought her clothes from Target. She had one pair of heels, black, uncomfortable, saved for the future. She studied business and psychology because one would make money and one would explain why people hurt each other. She fell asleep to K-dramas, dreamed in Korean phrases, imagined a life in Seoul where she could be someone else. Anywhere else. Her roommate Jessica used to say, "You're always planning an escape route, even when nothing's chasing you." Maybe Jessica was right. On the Tuesday that changed everything, Nylah was in the Roosevelt Library at 4:47 p.m., AirPods in, spreadsheet glowing on her MacBook Air. The used one from 3 jobs ago that she'd saved 6 months for. Excel formulas. Business law notes. 4 days until finals. 2 weeks until winter break when she worked double shifts. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Spam. Decline. It buzzed again. And again. Different number. Then a text. "Mom. Baby, come home. Now. It's urgent." Nyla's fingers froze on the keyboard. Her mother never texted during work hours. Never. Her mother cleaned houses, and Mrs. Patterson didn't like phone interruptions, which meant whatever was happening at home was the kind of urgent that broke rules. She packed her laptop in 30 seconds. The walk from campus to their Bronzeville apartment took 15 minutes. The wind off Lake Michigan was knives. Nyla's coat wasn't thick enough. She kept her head down, moving through the city like she could disappear into it. When she opened their apartment door, the first thing she noticed wasn't her parents. It was the men on the couch. 2 of them. One was American, expensive suit, cologne that arrived before he did. Smile like a knife that hadn't decided where to cut. The other was Korean, early 30s, tall, built like a soldier with a scar that ran from his ear to his collar like someone had tried to erase his face. He sat in absolute stillness watching everything, saying nothing. Nyla's mother was sitting in the corner chair, hands twisted together. Her father stood by the kitchen entrance like a man waiting to be executed. The American man stood when he saw her. "Nylah Cole? I'm Marcus Webb. We need to talk about your parents' debt." Nyla's throat closed. "Excuse me. $300,000. Borrowed from my organization. High interest. Very overdue." Her father's voice cracked. Baby, sit down. Please. I'm standing. Nylah didn't look away from Marcus. What debt? Her mother started crying, the silent kind, shoulders shaking. That meant everything was already broken. Marcus gestured to the tablet in his hands. Your father started a business. Needed capital. Went to the wrong people. Happens more often than you'd think. Nylah looked at her father. She'd known about the business venture. He'd been going to open a construction company, get out from under other people's roofs. She'd even given him the $500 she'd saved from Christmas tips to put toward it. Can't you just pay it back? She was stalling, her mind already moving through options and finding none. With what? Marcus leaned back. Your parents' combined income is $60,000 a year. Rent is $1,800 a month. There is no paying this back. There is only solving it. The Korean man shifted slightly, just enough for Nylah to understand that violence was not a hypothetical. Marcus continued, his voice almost gentle. Now, we could collect in the traditional way. Break some bones. Hurt people you love. Your mother's a house cleaner. Hands are valuable. Your father's a laborer. Shame about an accident on a job site. But that's messy. We prefer solutions. Nylah felt the blood drain from her face. My business partner in Seoul is looking for a wife. American, educated, beautiful. You fit the profile perfectly. For 3 full seconds Nylah thought he was joking. That this was some kind of prank. That her father would stand up and laugh, and everything would go back to normal. Instead, her father looked away. Her mother whispered, "Oh God. Oh God. I'm sorry. Baby, I'm sorry." Marcus swiped his tablet. A contract appeared on screen, thick with legalese, government seals, Korean and English text. Legal marriage. Registered in both countries. Full immigration sponsorship. You'll live in Seoul, luxury accommodations, paid allowance. Stay 5 years and your parents' debt is cleared. Completely cleared. No interest. No violence. Clean slate. Nylah's voice was flat. You're human trafficking. We're pragmatic businessmen, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. There isn't. Her mother stood up, hands reaching. Nylah, please. Please just listen. If we run, they'll find us. If we go to the police, they'll kill us, the Korean man said quietly. First words. His English was perfect, accented but clear. I suggest not. Nylah looked at her parents, really looked. Her father's hands were shaking. Her mother had aged a decade in 3 hours. They had already decided. That's what this meeting was. Not a negotiation. A formality. An explanation of terms they'd already accepted. They had sold her. When? Nylah's voice surprised her with its steadiness. Tonight, Marcus said. Flight leaves at 9. Nylah went to her bedroom and packed a suitcase. 1 bag. Everything she owned that mattered fit in 50 pounds of fabric and memory. She grabbed her passport. Tucked in a drawer under college acceptance letters she'd never frame now. She grabbed her favorite sweater. Her grandmother's cross. Her laptop. Her mother stood in the doorway, crying. It's only 5 years. You'll finish school after. You'll come home. I'll be someone else, Nylah said. If I come home at all, I won't be your daughter anymore. I'll be whatever he made me into. Her father from the hallway broke in. I'm sorry. Nylah, please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. If she did, she'd break. And she needed to stay whole long enough to survive whatever came next. Marcus drove her to the airport. The scarred man drove, silent, professional, the kind of man who'd done this before. The November night pressed against the car windows. Chicago shrunk behind her. The skyline got smaller. Smaller. Gone. On the tarmac at O'Hare, Nylah stood with her suitcase and understood a truth that would reshape her entire life. Some people think love means protecting someone from hard choices. Some people think love means making the hard choice for them. Some people, her parents, think love is sacrifice. But sometimes sacrifice is just another word for betrayal, dressed up in a mother's tears and a father's guilt. She had been 20 years old for 347 days. By tomorrow morning she would be someone different. The plane climbed into the night sky, and Nylah pressed her face to the window, watching America disappear beneath clouds. I thought the plane was taking me to another country. I didn't realize it was taking me out of the girl I used to be. In that moment, I didn't know what was waiting for me in Seoul. I didn't know about the Ghost King's curse, about the brides who disappeared. I didn't know I would put him on trial. I didn't know I would love him. And I definitely didn't know that in 5 years, I would stand in front of the world and say the thing I'm about to say. I don't regret what we built together, even though I'll never stop hating how it started. Some of the most important people in our lives break us open. Sometimes we choose to let them try to rebuild us. And sometimes that one choice, changes everything. First class tasted like champagne Nylah didn't drink and pretzel thin she couldn't swallow. Marcus sat across the aisle, working on his laptop like this was a regular Tuesday. She was a transaction in his calendar, already moved from pending to complete. He ordered her meal she didn't want and told her to eat anyway. My client prefers his investments healthy. At one point she asked, "What's his name?" Marcus didn't look up. Kang Jisung. You'll call him Mr. Kang until the marriage is registered. After that, he'll likely want you to call him nothing at all. Does he speak English? Fluently. He was educated partly in London. Very strategic man. Built an empire on 3 continents before he turned 30. Now he's the legitimate face of his family. Tech investments, real estate, charity foundations. Very respected. The criminal business, his brothers handle that. He's moved beyond it. Nylah understood the subtext. He was the kind of criminal who could hide in plain sight, which made him more dangerous, not less. Marcus continued. He's 39. Never been married, though there were arrangements. Women who agreed and then couldn't handle it. He doesn't keep failed investments. Does he hurt them? The question escaped before Nylah could stop it. Marcus finally looked at her. Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. He's a ghost, Nylah. That's what they call him. There's nothing inside him to hurt you the way you want to hurt. The problem is there's nothing inside him to love you with either. The flight attendant came by with blankets. Nylah wrapped herself in one, watching the dark Pacific below, understanding that she was flying toward a man who didn't feel things, for a life she hadn't chosen, to pay a debt that wasn't hers. 14 hours. That was all she had before she became Mrs. Kang. Seoul hit like a fever. The airport was massive, glass and steel, and something that looked like the future. Signs in Hangul that Nylah could partially read because of 2 years of after-school Korean classes. The air smelled different. Moved different. People moved differently, efficient, purposeful, no wasted energy. Marcus guided her through customs like she was a piece of luggage. No problems. No questions. Money and connections smoothed every rough edge. The driver was the scarred man from Chicago, Mr. Park, Marcus called him. He took her single suitcase and placed it in the trunk of a black Mercedes with the reverence of someone handling expensive cargo. As they drove through Seoul, Nylah pressed her face to the window like a child. It was night, but the city was alive. Neon signs, restaurants still packed, streets full of people living lives she didn't belong to. Gangnam District rose up like a monument to wealth. Everyone on the streets was thin and beautiful and clothed in brands she recognized from YouTube videos. They passed laughing groups of university students, couples holding hands, girls her age with lives that didn't involve being purchased like property. She thought, I should have been one of them. The Mercedes turned away from the glittering center, moving into older, quieter neighborhoods where walls grew higher and buildings sprawled out. Old money, the kind that didn't need to flash. The iron gates opened automatically as they approached. Beyond them, a glass tower, 40 stories, the top 5 floors all glass and impossible luxury. Her new prison. The penthouse elevator required a fingerprint to access. Nylah almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Biometric security to keep the prisoner locked in place. When the doors opened directly into living space, her breath caught despite herself. It was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Seoul. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her parents' house. Artwork that looked museum quality. Everything in shades of white, gray, black, as though color itself was forbidden here. And in front of the window, silhouetted against the city lights, a man. Kang Jisung turned slowly, and Nylah understood why they called him a ghost. His hair was white, not gray, not silver, pure white like fresh snow. It fell past his shoulders, which was unusual for a Korean man his age, but somehow it worked. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 1 inch, with the kind of face that stopped people in the street. Sharp cheekbones. Full lips. Eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. Beautiful. Completely, terrifyingly beautiful. And utterly, completely cold. He studied her the way one studies a painting at auction, evaluating, calculating, trying to determine if the price was worth the investment. Amy Harris, he said. His English was flawless with just a hint of London accent. You're younger than I expected. Nylah's fear crystallized into anger. She was too tired, too traumatized, too angry to be gracious. And you're exactly as soulless as I expected. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. I like women with spirit, he said finally. The obedient ones bore me. But understand this, Amy. You can be angry. You can hate me. But you will respect me in public. You will play the role of devoted wife. And you will not embarrass me. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Mr. Kang. Also, my name is Nylah. Not Amy. Another flicker of something in his eyes. Nylah Cole. I apologize. Mrs. Choi will show you to your room. We have a charity gala tomorrow. You'll need to look like you actually want to be married to me. He turned back to the window, dismissing her with his back. Nylah followed Mrs. Choi, a stern older woman who walked like she was guarding a museum, down a hallway to a bedroom that was bigger than her parents' entire apartment. When the door closed behind her, Nylah was finally, blessedly alone. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, in the clothes she'd worn on the plane, in a penthouse that belonged to a man she'd just met, in a country where she didn't speak the language, and let herself cry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Silent tears that soaked into the expensive silk sheets like they didn't matter. Like she didn't matter. Outside, Seoul glittered. Inside, a girl became a wife and nobody celebrated. The first week was structured like a puzzle designed to keep her sane without letting her escape. Breakfast in the kitchen with Mrs. Choi watching every bite. Korean language lessons on a tablet Nylah was given but couldn't use to contact anyone. Walks through the penthouse but never outside. The balcony looked out at all of Seoul, but the doors were locked from the outside. She was a prisoner who was allowed to see the world, just not touch it. Jisung was gone most days before she woke and didn't return until after she'd gone to bed. There was a separate bedroom for him, which she was grateful for. The idea of sharing space with him, with anyone who'd bought her like property, made her skin crawl. But at night sometimes she heard him. Piano music drifting through the walls. A melody so heartbreaking it made her chest ache. She'd lie in her luxury prison and listen to a man play like his fingers remembered every reason he was dead inside. By the second week, Nylah had started collecting information. She'd found a locked drawer in the study with old photographs. Jisung as a younger man, still with black hair, in places she didn't recognize. There were documents in Korean she couldn't fully read but understood the tone of. Criminal networks, money transfers, arrests that never stuck. There were articles about the Kang family. About his brothers. About the oldest Deong who ran drugs. The middle brother Minsu who ran weapons. And Jisung who ran everything legitimate on top of the filthy money underneath, like he was building a beautiful building on a foundation of graves. On day 16, Nylah was studying Korean apps in the living room when Mrs. Choi's phone rang. Mrs. Choi left the room, and for the first time, Nylah had access to the internet without supervision. She Googled, Kang Jisung brides. Ghost King Seoul missing women. Korean Mafia wives disappeared. The results made her blood ice. Rumors on forums. Whispers on Reddit threads. A woman named Daeun who married Kang Jisung in 2018. Fell from a balcony 6 months into the marriage. A woman named Ji-woo who married him in 2019. Ran away to Japan. Never contacted her family again. A woman named Hae-sung who married him in 2020. Mental breakdown, sanitarium, never returned. The pattern was clear. Something about Kang Jisung destroyed women. Or maybe Nylah's journalist brain kicked in. Maybe something about the men around Kang Jisung destroyed women. Mrs. Choi came back. Nylah closed the browser. But now she knew. She wasn't just trapped with a cold man. She was trapped with a curse. That night she found the piano. It was in a room she'd never been allowed in, locked. But Nylah had watched Mrs. Choi unlock it that morning to clean. and she'd left a door slightly ajar. A Steinway grand piano, black as midnight, sitting in a room with no other furniture. She was walking past when the music started. Jisung at the piano, white hair falling forward, eyes closed, his fingers moving like prayer or confession. The melody was something classical, Chopin maybe, but played like it was the first time he was understanding his own heartbreak. Nylah stood in the doorway, invisible, watching a man who didn't feel things play like his life depended on it. When he finished, he sat for a long moment in silence. Then he opened his eyes and looked directly at her. "You should be asleep," he said. "I heard the music." He studied her with an expression she couldn't read. "Do you play?" "No." "Too bad. Everyone should have a language that doesn't require words." He stood, and she moved aside so he could pass. As he did, she caught his scent, expensive cologne soap, something underneath that smelled like expensive and lonely. That night, Nylah lay awake and understood the first piece of her survival. Kang Jisung was broken. He was cold, yes. But he was broken first. Which meant there was a human underneath the ice, no matter how deep the freeze went. Which meant maybe she wasn't just trapped in a cage with a monster. Maybe she was trapped with something that used to be human and was trying, or had stopped trying to be again. The wedding dress arrived without her opinion. It was white, immaculate, tailored so precisely it felt like armor. Auntie Yoon buttoned it up the back while Nylah stood motionless, feeling the silk wrap around her like a second skin. A veil was pinned into her braids. A concession, Auntie Yoon explained, because Nylah's natural hair might offend some guests. Translation: look American enough to be exotic, not so foreign that you're threatening. The ceremony was held in a small government office with polished wood and the smell of old paper. 2 witnesses Nylah didn't know. A translator who spoke too fast. Jisung in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her parents' first car. When he arrived, he looked at her exactly once. A slow scan from her face to her feet and back up, and something unreadable flickered across his features. "You look adequate," he said in English, then turned to the officiant. The Korean words came in waves she couldn't parse. The translator's English was clipped and efficient. Vows, legal declarations, mutual agreement. Nylah heard her name spoken wrong, heard marriage pronounced like a business contract, heard Jisung's voice steady and certain when he said his part. Then the translator turned to her. "You will repeat after me." Nylah's mouth was dry. She repeated the Korean phonetically, each word tasting like ash. The officiant's stamp came down hard on documents. Jisung's signature was careful, almost calligraphic. It was over in 20 minutes. The officiant pronounced them married. Jisung leaned in and kissed her cheek. His lips were cold, his breath smelled like expensive coffee. "Welcome to the family," he murmured, and it sounded like a threat disguised as welcome. The penthouse felt different after the ceremony. Bigger. Colder. Auntie Yoon helped Nylah remove the dress, hanging it carefully in a closet that already held clothes. Dresses, blouses, shoes, all in her size, all without her input. A replacement wardrobe for a replacement life. "You will go to your room," Auntie Yoon instructed. "Mr. Kang has business. He does not require anything tonight." Nylah nodded, grateful and ashamed of the gratitude. She dressed in one of the silk nightgowns provided, pale blue, expensive, impersonal, and lay in the dark of her wedding night, listening to soul hum beyond the windows. At some point she heard the piano. Soft, distant. A melody that sounded like a man remembering something he'd lost. Nylah rose, barefoot, and followed the sound through halls she was still learning. The music came from a room at the west end of the penthouse, one she'd never been allowed to enter. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Kang Jisung sat at a grand piano, white hair falling forward, eyes closed, his hands moving with a precision that seemed impossible for someone so utterly still. The melody was Chopin. She recognized it from old movies, melancholic, beautiful, desperate. He played like his fingers were confessing things his mouth would never say. Nylah watched from the doorway unseen and understood her first real truth about this man. He was not incapable of feeling. He was incapable of showing it. Those were 2 different things entirely. The melody ended. Jisung's hand stilled on the keys. His eyes remained closed for a long moment, as though he was gathering himself back into the shape of the ghost he needed to be. Then his eyes opened, and he looked directly at her. You should be asleep, he said. Not angry. Not surprised. I heard the music. He studied her with an expression that could have been contempt or curiosity. Do you play? No. Too bad. Music is a language that requires no translation. He stood and moved past her toward the door. As he did, she caught his scent. Expensive cologne layered over something else, something like loneliness. Rest, wife, he said. And there was something in his tone that suggested the word meant nothing to him. Tomorrow begins the real work. The real work was invisible. Nylah learned that real work meant being the right wife at the right moment. It meant learning to walk with her shoulders back, learning to smile without showing teeth, learning to bow at the correct angle to Jisung's business associates when they came to the penthouse. It meant listening to Auntie Yoon correct her Korean pronunciation, meant studying fashion magazines written in Hangul until her eyes burned, meant existing as a beautiful absence in a beautiful space. The penthouse was a museum, not a home. Every surface was clean, every object precisely placed. There were no photographs except one, a woman Nylah didn't recognize, hanging in a hallway Jisung never used. His mother, Auntie Yoon, explained briefly, then changed the subject when Nylah asked what happened to her. Meals were always with Auntie Yoon watching. Jisung ate separately in his study, on a schedule that suggested he treated food like fuel, not comfort. He came and went like a ghost. Nylah would wake to find he'd been there and gone, leaving only the faint scent of expensive cologne on the hallway air. But sometimes, after midnight when the city quieted, she heard the piano again. Different melodies each night. Sad ones. Angry ones. One that sounded like a battle fought in silence. Nylah began to leave her door open, listening, mapping the landscape of a man's broken heart through music only he knew he was still capable of making. On the 7th night, she left her room and followed the music, stepping into the piano room with her heart in her throat. Jisung didn't stop playing, didn't acknowledge her. But he didn't tell her to leave either. She sat on the edge of the room, small and still, and listened to a man who had bought her play like his life depended on it. When the melody ended, he turned to her slowly. Why do you keep coming here? His English was measured, careful. Because, Nylah said, surprising herself with the honesty, it's the only time you sound like you're actually alive. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. A crack in the ice, so small it might have been her imagination. Feeling is a liability, he said finally. I eliminated mine years ago. But you still play, Nylah countered. Muscle memory, he said. A habit of a ghost trying to remember what it meant to be human. He turned back to the piano and began playing again a different piece. Something almost melancholic, almost beautiful. Nylah sat in the doorway and let the sound wrap around her. And for the first time since she arrived in Seoul, she didn't feel entirely alone. 2 weeks into the marriage, Nylah discovered the internet. Auntie Yoon left her in the study to read Korean fashion, leaving her laptop unsupervised for exactly 4 minutes. It was enough. Nylah opened a browser and typed, Kang Jisung brides. The results made her blood freeze. A woman named Daeun, married to Kang Jisung in 2018, fell from a balcony 6 months into the marriage. A woman named Jiwoo, married in 2019, ran away to Japan, never contacted family. A woman named Haesung, married in 2020, mental breakdown, hospitalized, never returned. The pattern was clear. The rumors were darker still, whispered on Reddit threads in English, on Korean forums she could only half read. The Ghost King's curse. Every wife disappeared or broke. No exceptions. Some said he was psychologically abusive. Some said he was simply incapable of attachment and the women went mad trying to reach him. Some said, and this chilled her most, that his cousin Min Jae, who appeared in photos beside Jisung, had something to do with it. Nylah heard footsteps and closed the browser. Her hands were shaking. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark and understood. She hadn't married a man. She'd married a curse. Or worse, she'd married into a family where the women disappeared, and no one asked questions. She thought about running, about stealing her passport and vanishing into Seoul's anonymous crowds. But Marcus's words echoed. Your parents will be found. So Nylah lay in the dark and made a decision. She would survive this. She would learn everything. And one day, when she understood the full shape of this nightmare, she would burn it to the ground. 3 weeks in, Nylah overheard something she wasn't meant to hear. Jisung was on the phone in his study, speaking rapid Korean she only partially understood. But certain words cut through: bride, transfer, payment, and a name. Min-jae. She moved closer to the door, every muscle taut. "I told you this ends," Jisung said in English now, his voice harder than she'd ever heard it. "No more transfers. No more women disappearing. I'm out of that business." A pause. She couldn't hear the other end, but Jisung's response was icy. "What happened to Daeun and the others is not my burden anymore. If you want to continue, do it without my name. I'm legitimate now." Another pause. "Tell Marcus the Chicago connection is finished. If he tries to pressure me through Cole's family, I will end him. And you." He hung up. Nylah stepped back quickly, her mind spinning. Jisung hadn't just bought her. He'd been part of a trafficking operation. The transfers were other women, sold like she'd been sold. And this cousin Min-jae was still doing it. She wasn't the first. And if no one stopped him, she wouldn't be the last. That night, when Jisung emerged from his study, he found Nylah waiting in the living room, still in her day clothes, sitting completely still. "I heard your phone call," she said before he could speak. His entire body went rigid. "You shouldn't have been." "I know what you did," Nylah interrupted. "The women. The trafficking. The transfers." She stood, facing him directly. "I know you're supposed to be out now, but your cousin isn't. And Marcus is still operating. My parents are still in danger because of Marcus." Jisung's face was unreadable, but she saw his hands tighten into fists at his sides. "That information is dangerous for you to have," he said quietly. "Good," Nylah replied. "Because I'm done being ignorant. If you're going to keep me here, I want the truth. All of it. And then I want to know what you're going to do about it." For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then slowly, something in his expression shifted. It wasn't softness. Jisung's face couldn't seem to hold softness. But it was something like recognition. "Sit," he said finally. And for the first time since arriving in Seoul, Nylah had a real conversation with the man she was married to. They sat in the study, Jisung at his desk, Nylah in a leather chair across from him. The city sprawled behind glass, indifferent to the reckoning happening in this room. He poured himself whiskey without offering her any. The silence stretched like a threat. "How much do you understand?" he asked finally. "Enough to know you're not as far from your family's business as you claim," Nylah replied. "You bought me through a trafficking network. My parents' debt was leverage. And there were others before me." Jisung took a long drink. "Yes." The honesty was almost shocking. "I came back to Seoul 15 years ago to take over the legitimate side of the family business," he continued. "My brothers handled drugs, weapons, protection rackets. I was supposed to handle the money laundering, real estate, tech investments, charity foundations, clean the dirty money and make it shine." He set the glass down carefully. 3 years ago, I decided to expand revenue. Min-jae, my cousin, suggested human trafficking. Young women from poor countries, married off to wealthy men for visa sponsorship, then moved to other operations. It was profitable, efficient, completely amoral. Nylah's stomach turned. And the women who disappeared? Daeun tried to run. Min-jae had her moved to a different operation in Shanghai. Jiwoo became unstable, the isolation, the realization of what she was, broke something in her. She was in a psychiatric facility in Busan last I heard. Hae-sung. He paused, jaw tightening. Hae-sung resisted a buyer in Bangkok. There was an incident. She didn't survive it. The words hung in the air like bodies. "Why are you telling me this?" Nylah whispered. "Because you asked. Because you deserve to know what you married into." He looked at her directly, and for the first time she saw something human in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or the ghost of a conscience he thought he'd eliminated. "And because 3 months ago I decided to get out." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I was reviewing files. Looking at profit margins, new acquisitions. And I saw your photo. Your real name. Your transcript from Roosevelt University. 4.0 GPA in Business and International Relations. Your essay about building legitimate economic systems for marginalized communities. He paused. I realized I was about to destroy someone who was trying to build the world I pretended to want. So you bought me anyway. I bought you to save you, he said. Your parents' debt would have been collected one way or another. If not through you, then through violence. At least this way you're here. Safe. I'm dismantling the operation from the inside. Nylah stood abruptly. You think that makes this okay? You think good intentions erase what you did? No, Jisung said quietly. I think intentions are irrelevant. But I think if you're willing, we could do something with this knowledge that matters. Like what? Help me dismantle it completely. Help me gather evidence against Min-jae and Marcus. Help me make sure what happened to you. What happened to Daeun and Ji-woo and Haesung never happens to anyone else. Nylah stared at him. He was asking her to become complicit in his redemption. She should have said no. Should have demanded her passport and run. But somewhere in the past 3 weeks something had shifted. And she realized with terrible clarity, she was beginning to see him as human. That was the most dangerous thing of all. Over the next month, Nylah became something between wife and conspirator. By day she played the role Jisung needed, the beautiful black American wife, tasteful in her clothing, graceful in her movements, the perfect trophy for Seoul's elite circles. She attended galas and fundraisers, smiled at the cameras, learned to say thank you in perfect Korean. By night, she became an investigator. Jisung gave her access to certain files, carefully curated information about the trafficking operation. Names, dates, locations. She learned that Min-jae ran at least 5 bride pipelines across Southeast Asia. That Marcus had connections in Chicago, Lagos, and Miami. That there were at least 23 documented women currently in the system. She began documenting everything. Her psychology classes had taught her how to spot patterns, how to understand predatory behavior. She cross-referenced dates of marriages with disappearances, mapped financial transactions, began building a picture of a sophisticated human trafficking network disguised as international matchmaking. One night, 3 weeks into her investigation, she found something that changed everything. A woman named Kira Chun, married to a wealthy businessman in Bangkok in 2019, disappeared after refusing to participate in what the file delicately called additional services. But here was the thing. Kira-chan had a sister in Seoul, and that sister had been looking for her for 5 years. Nylah found the sister's contact information buried in a charity registry. She borrowed Jisung's tablet, he'd given her access to most things now, and sent an encrypted message through a burner email. I might know what happened to your sister. The response came within hours. A video call. And when the woman's face appeared on screen, Nylah saw desperate hope, barely contained rage, and a determination that mirrored her own. The woman's name was Lily Chun. She had been searching for Kira for 5 years. She worked as a social worker in Seoul, helping immigrant women. And when Nylah told her about the trafficking operation, Lily didn't hesitate. I want to help, Lily said immediately. I want to build a case. Real evidence. Not just Kang family internal documents. I have contacts in law enforcement, in international human rights organizations. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. Nylah felt something crystallize inside her. The moment when victim became victor, when she stopped surviving and started fighting back. 3 months into the marriage, Jisung told her they were going to a charity gala. For children's hospitals, he said. Important donors. You need to be perfect. The dress arrived. Emerald silk that caught the light like fire against her dark skin. When Nylah emerged from her room, Jisung looked at her for a long moment. You're beautiful, he said. And this time it didn't sound like possession. Sounded like confession. The gala was held in the Seoul Shilla Hotel. A glittering affair with champagne and people dripping money. Nylah played her part. Laughed at the right moments. Asked business associates questions about their ventures. Held Jisung's arm like they were actually a couple. She overheard whispers in Korean she was becoming fluent enough to understand. The Ghost King's new wife. She's so young. How long before she disappears too? But she held her head high. Let them wonder. Jisung was speaking with a Japanese investor when the lights went out. Not dimmed. Out. Complete darkness for exactly 3 seconds. Then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And then came the screaming. Armed men, 6 of them, faces covered, guns drawn, burst through the ballroom doors. "We want Kang Jisung," one shouted in Korean. "Come out or we start shooting." The crowd panicked. Waiters dropped trays. Women screamed. Men tried to position themselves between the guns and their wives, a futile gesture of protection. Nylah felt Jisung before she saw him, his hand on her lower back, guiding her away from the chaos with a certainty that suggested he'd planned for this exact scenario. "Stay close," he whispered. "Don't let go of me." They moved through a service corridor. Jisung moved like he'd memorized Seoul's underground infrastructure. Through kitchens where confused chefs watched them pass. Downstairs, down again, into a parking garage lit with halogen strips. A motorcycle was waiting. A man in a helmet stood beside it, engine already running. Jisung pulled her toward it. "Get on. Hold tight. Don't let go." Nylah climbed on behind him, her fancy dress bunching around her thighs, her heels hanging uselessly. Behind them, shouts echoed through the garage. A gunshot. Jisung gunned the engine and they shot out into Seoul's night, weaving through traffic with a precision that suggested he'd done this before. They ended up in a bare apartment in Itaewon. A safe house, Jisung called it. No furniture except a bed and a table. Curtains drawn tight. The windows were frosted, impossible to see through from outside. Nylah sat on the edge of the bed, shaking from adrenaline, still in her emerald dress. Jisung checked the perimeter, verified they weren't followed, then finally sat beside her. "Who were they?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Rivals. My brothers have enemies. Someone wanted leverage. Why would they use me? Because they know you matter to me." The words hung in the air. Jisung stood up, moving away from her as though proximity was dangerous. "That was a mistake," he continued quietly. "Letting you matter. I should have kept you at a distance." Nylah stood too. "You can't just decide that now. You can't buy me, trap me, make me complicit in dismantling your empire, and then act like it doesn't mean anything." "Meaning is dangerous," Jisung replied. "It clouds judgment. It makes you weak." "Maybe I want to be weak," Nylah shot back. "Maybe I want to feel something other than fear for once in my life." He turned to face her. In the half-light of the safe house, he looked like exactly what he was. A man trying to become something different, failing, trying anyway. "If I let myself feel what I feel when I look at you," he said slowly, "then I am no longer fit to lead this family. And if I'm not leading it, Min-jae will. And Daeun and Ji-woo and all the others will mean nothing. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying the evidence you've been gathering with Lily Chan, it's enough. We can go to the authorities. We can dismantle this completely. But there's a cost." "What cost?" "Me. I'll go to prison. For my role in the operation, for Hae-sung's death, for everything. And you'll be free. Really free. Not just playing a role. Your parents' debt will be publicly resolved. Your testimony will be protected. You can go home or stay in Seoul or disappear entirely. Your choice." Nylah felt the ground shift beneath her. "And if I don't want you to go to prison? Then you're letting a trafficking operation continue. And you'll know every day that you chose me over the 23 women still in the system." He moved toward the window, keeping his back to her. "I've already decided. I'm going to testify. I'm going to give evidence. The only question is whether you come with me or run." Nylah stood in the darkness of that safe house and understood the central cruelty of her situation. She had been forced into loving the architect of her own imprisonment. And now he was asking her to choose between that love and justice. She didn't answer him that night. Instead, she fell asleep beside him on the bare mattress, for the first time their bodies close but not touching. A strange kind of intimacy that meant everything and nothing at all. In the morning, Lily Chun called with news. "The authorities are ready to move," she said. "Federal investigators have evidence of the trafficking network. International partners are coordinated. They want to strike in 3 days. Jisung needs to agree to be a witness in exchange for a reduced sentence." Nylah relayed the message to Jisung, who simply nodded. 3 days, he said. "We go public. We tell the world exactly how we met and why. And then justice takes its course." But before that, Nylah had one more thing to do. She called her parents. Her mother answered on the first ring, as though she'd been waiting 5 months for this call. "Baby." Her mother's voice cracked. "Is that you? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Nylah said quietly. "But I need you to listen very carefully. In 2 days you're going to see my name on the news. You're going to hear about trafficking, about a Korean mafia boss, about a forced marriage. And it's all true." Her mother started to cry. Nylah continued anyway. "I'm going to testify. Against the man I married. Against Marcus. Against the entire operation that put me where I am. And I need you to understand. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a witness. I'm a survivor. And I'm going to make sure no other girl from Chicago gets sold." "Nylah, I'm so sorry. We're so sorry. Please come home." "I will come home," Nylah interrupted. "But not to the people who sold me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did broke something in me. And I need to know if it can ever be fixed. Right now, the only thing I can fix is what happens to other girls. So that's what I'm going to do." She hung up. Jisung was watching her from across the room. "You could have run," he said. "Use this to escape and never look back." "I know," Nylah replied. "But I didn't." She walked to him and stood close enough to breathe the same air. "I'm not staying because I forgive you. I'm staying because I believe you can be better. And because you need someone to witness that transformation. And because," she paused, her voice dropping, "I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than anything else." Jisung reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. She didn't. His hand touched her face, and it was the gentlest thing he'd ever done to her. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "No," Nylah agreed. "You don't. But you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to become someone who might. Starting with prison. Starting with truth. Starting with making this right." He pulled her close, and this time it wasn't possession or control. It was surrender. 3 days later, Seoul woke to federal raids. Armed agents hit the Kang family compounds across the city. Min Jae was arrested at his office. Marcus, contacted and arrested at Incheon Airport trying to flee. Jisung walked into federal headquarters voluntarily, with his lawyer and with Nylah beside him. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. A massive ballroom at the Seoul Press Center. Over 200 journalists. International media. Everything riding on the next hour. Nylah stood in a private room backstage, wearing a simple navy dress. No armor, no performance. Just herself. Jisung sat beside her in a similar suit, his white hair neat, his hands absolutely still. "Last chance to leave," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving," Nylah replied. "Are you?" "No. But I need you to know something. Whatever happens in that room, whatever they ask, whatever the world decides about me, I want you to know that the past 3 months with you were the first time in my life I felt like redemption might actually be possible. I failed before. I'm probably going to fail again. But you made me want to try." Nylah took his hand. His skin was cold as always. "Then we tried together." The attorney signaled. "Time." They walked out together onto a stage flooded with lights. Cameras exploded like fireworks. Nylah sat at the center panel, Jisung beside her, their lawyer on the end. Behind them, a screen displayed the evidence. Financial records, contracts, photographs of the missing women. A reporter stood immediately. "Mrs. Kang, is it true your husband forced you into marriage?" Nylah leaned toward the microphone. "I was trafficked," she said clearly. "I was sold to a 39-year-old Korean mafia boss to pay my parents' $300,000 debt. The marriage was not consensual. It was a transaction. That is a fact that will never change, no matter what feelings developed afterward." The room erupted. She continued anyway. "I was also 20 years old. I was terrified. I was isolated in a foreign country without my passport. By every legal definition, I was a human trafficking victim. And the man sitting beside me was complicit in that crime." She let that settle, then continued. "What is also true is that 3 months ago, Kang Jisung chose to dismantle the operation he had built. He chose to gather evidence against his own family. He chose to accept responsibility for his crimes. He chose redemption over protection." A reporter shouted. "Are you defending him?" "No," Nylah said calmly. I am telling you that justice is not binary. Redemption does not erase harm. But accountability, real legal permanent accountability, is a path forward. Kang Jisung is willing to walk that path. The question is whether this system will allow him to, or whether we prefer to simply destroy without rebuilding. Jisung leaned toward his own microphone. His voice was steady. My name is Kang Jisung. I am 39 years old. I am a trafficker, a criminal, and a man who facilitated the sale of at least 23 women into servitude. I did this for profit. I did this without remorse for nearly 3 years. I am here today to accept full responsibility and to testify against everyone involved in this operation, including my own family. He paused, his black eyes fixed on the cameras. There is no redemption for what I have done. There is only consequence and the possibility that my testimony might prevent this from happening to anyone else. I am prepared to spend whatever time in prison that the courts deem appropriate. I am prepared to have my assets seized and redirected to support trafficking survivors. I am prepared to spend the rest of my life making partial restitution for complete harm I cannot undo. Nylah watched him and felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness but recognition. He was finally being honest. Finally being human. The press conference lasted 2 hours. By the end, Nylah's testimony had been broadcast to every major network in Asia and internationally. Jisung's confession was already trending on social media. And the world was asking a question that would echo for years. Can a man who traffics women ever be trusted again, even if he testifies against his own family? The weeks following the press conference were chaos. Federal investigators raided the Kang family properties. Minji's apartment held records of at least 47 women trafficked through his operations. Marcus's network extended further than anyone realized. Connections in 12 countries, hundreds of victims, decades of operations. But the most shocking discovery was about Jisung's past. Investigators found documents from his time in Manila 15 years ago, the incident that had turned his hair white. He hadn't just killed 7 men in self-defense. The men had been trafficking victims. Jisung, working for his family at the time, had been sent to liquidate a failed operation. Instead, he'd freed the women and killed the men holding them. It changed the narrative entirely. Lily Chun worked with Nylah and law enforcement to track down the missing women. Daeun was found in Shanghai, traumatized but alive, working in a factory owned by the trafficking network. Jiwoo was released from the psychiatric facility in Busan. Haesung. They found her remains in a mass grave outside Bangkok, identified through DNA. Each woman became part of the case. Each story was documented, recorded, made into testimony that would live forever in court records. And through it all, Nylah became the face of survival. News outlets called her the woman who put the Ghost King on trial. She gave interviews about her experience, about the moment she realized she was part of a larger system of exploitation. She spoke about the choice to stay with Jisung not out of love, but out of the belief that his testimony could save others. Not everyone understood. Her parents called, begging her to come home, to leave Seoul, to move on. Former friends from Roosevelt sent messages saying she was enabling abuse by standing beside him. Feminist groups protested outside the courtroom, their signs reading, "She's choosing her abuser and justice, not romance." But other voices emerged too. Women who had been trafficked, who recognized their own stories in hers. Activists who saw that what Nylah was doing, staying engaged with the system, demanding accountability from the perpetrator, using her voice to expose the network, was not complicity but a form of resistance. Lily Chun became her closest confidant. Together they worked to establish a foundation for trafficking survivors, funded by seized Kang family assets, run independently, existing to help women rebuild their lives. "You're changing the game," Lily told her one night, sitting in the foundation's new office. "You're showing that survival isn't just about escaping. It's about transforming what tried to destroy you into something that protects others." Nylah nodded. "I'm not doing it for him. I need you to understand that. I'm doing it for every girl who didn't get a Jisung to confess, who doesn't get a testimony, who just disappears." Seoul District Court 3 months later. The trial was the largest human trafficking case in Korean history. Min-jae faced 15 counts. Marcus faced charges that extended internationally. and Jisung sat in the defendant's chair, waiting to hear his fate. Nylah testified for 6 hours. She described her abduction, her isolation, her fear. She described the piano music at 3 a.m. She described the moment Jisung confessed the truth. She described the safe house and the choice she made. When the prosecutor asked, "Did you love the man who trafficked you?" Nylah answered honestly, "I don't know. I know that I began to see his humanity. I know that I believed he was trying to change. I know that love and trauma can be impossible to untangle. But what I know most clearly is that none of that matters. What matters is that he committed crimes and he is answering for them. My feelings don't make him innocent. They just make me human." When Jisung's defense attorney cross-examined her, he asked, "Do you believe Mr. Kang is a good man?" Nylah looked directly at Jisung. "No. I believe he is a man trying to become better. There's a difference. Good men don't traffic women. Redeemed men acknowledge what they've done and accept punishment. Jisung is the latter. Whether he ever becomes the former, I don't know. I hope so. But I'm not here to argue that he is good. I'm here to argue that his testimony is true, and that accountability matters more than redemption." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Testimony from Daeun Ji-woo and the families of missing women. Financial evidence tying Jisung to at least 23 transactions. Medical evidence of trauma. Photographs of safe houses. Communications between Jisung and Min-jae documenting the trafficking operation. And Jisung's own testimony where he detailed every crime, every victim, every moment he prioritized profit over human life. On the final day of closing arguments, the prosecutor stood before the court and called for maximum sentences. 20 years for Jisung, 30 for Min-jae, 25 for Marcus. These men did not simply commit crimes, the prosecutor said. They dismantled the concept of human dignity itself. They treated women as products. They destroyed lives for profit. Justice demands that they spend significant time considering what they have done. The verdict came down on a cold February morning, exactly 1 year after Nylah arrived in Seoul. Kang Jisung, 18 years imprisonment, full asset seizure, lifetime prohibition from business operations. Kang Min-jae, 25 years imprisonment, conspiracy charges, attempted murder charges related to Hae-sung's death. Marcus Webb, 20 years imprisonment, charges extended to 15 countries, international manhunt ongoing for his associates. Nylah sat in the courtroom gallery and watched Jisung as the sentence was read. His expression didn't change. He had prepared for this, accepted it. But when he was led out of the courtroom, he looked back at her one last time. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, Nylah understood the strange, complicated truth of their story. He had bought her, but she had chosen him. He had trapped her, but she had freed herself by choosing to stay. He had destroyed her old life, but she had rebuilt a new one in the rubble. After the trial, she waited for him in a small visiting room at Seoul Detention Center. He was wearing a gray prison suit, his white hair tied back, his hands cuffed. 18 years, he said as he sat down across from her. "Will you wait?" Nylah was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to finish my degree. I'm going to run the foundation. I'm going to help other women rebuild their lives. I'm going to become someone who matters in ways that have nothing to do with you." Jisung nodded, as though he'd expected this answer. "But," Nylah continued, "I'm going to visit you every month if I can. And I'm going to wait to see if the man I believe you can become is real, or just a beautiful fantasy. If in 18 years you walk out of here and you're different, if you're someone who has truly changed, then maybe we can talk about what comes next." "That's fair," Jisung said quietly. "It's not fair," Nylah corrected. "It's just the best we can do. Justice isn't fair. Redemption isn't fair. Love isn't fair. But this choosing each other in full knowledge of what we've done and what we're paying for it, this might be real." She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. The guard didn't stop her. "I'm not forgiving you," she said clearly. "I'm just choosing to believe that people can change. I'm choosing to believe that your testimony, your willingness to accept punishment, your surrender of everything you built, that all of it means something." Jisung's hand, even in cuffs, held hers. "It means everything because you're choosing it." Nylah stood on the balcony of her new apartment. Not in Seoul but in a small neighborhood in Gangneung, overlooking the coast. She was 25 now, a graduate of Seoul National University, the director of the Cole Foundation for Trafficking Survivors, and the author of a published memoir that had become a bestseller across Asia. The foundation had helped 287 women rebuild their lives. 12 of them were now running their own businesses. 5 had become activists. 3 had testified in trials that resulted in convictions. Lily Chun was her deputy director. They worked together every day, turning trauma into transformation, turning pain into purpose. The media still followed her story. Documentary crews wanted access. Publishers wanted sequels. Producers wanted to turn her life into a Netflix series. She said no to most of it. What mattered wasn't the spectacle. What mattered was the work. She visited Jisung in prison once a month. They talked about his rehabilitation program, about the books he read, about the classes he taught other inmates. He had not become a good man, that was never possible. But he had become an accountable man. A man spending his time in service working toward restitution. Last month when she visited, he gave her something, a letter he'd written, describing his analysis of the trafficking network, suggestions for how to dismantle similar operations in other countries. She'd passed it to law enforcement. It had already helped shut down 2 operations in Southeast Asia. "I don't know if I'll ever be the man you deserve," he said during that visit. "No," Nylah agreed. "But you're becoming the man who deserves to try." 6 months later, Nylah stands before cameras again. She is pregnant. 6 months along. The baby's father is not the man in prison. That would be too simple, too Hollywood. Instead, she had fallen in love with Lily's older brother, a social worker who believed in rebuilding the broken world. They were getting married next spring. But today the press conference is different. Beside her sits a woman named Daeun, who had testified against Jisung. And next to her Kira Chun, the woman Nylah had found evidence of years ago, now rescued and rebuilding her life in Seoul. They are announcing a new initiative, an international task force dedicated to dismantling human trafficking networks, founded on evidence that Kang Jisung compiled from prison and passed to authorities. His testimony, combined with the survivors' accounts, had resulted in 127 arrests across 12 countries. "I was asked to lead this initiative," Nylah explains to the cameras, "because I am a survivor of the very crime we are working to stop. I was trafficked. I was sold. I was imprisoned in a relationship built on power imbalance and coercion." She pauses, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "But I was also given a choice. I was given the chance to decide whether to walk away or to stay and fight. I chose to fight. I chose to transform my own imprisonment into something that protects others. And I want every survivor watching this to know you get to make that choice too. You get to decide what your story means. No one else gets to define it for you." A reporter shouts, "Do you believe Kang Jisung deserves redemption?" Nylah takes a breath. "I believe Kang Jisung deserves 18 years in prison. I believe he deserves to spend the rest of his life making partial restitution for complete harm he cannot undo. I believe he deserves consequences. But I also believe that people can change. Not because of love. Not because of romance. But because they decide to accept accountability and do the hard work of becoming different." She looks directly at the camera. "In 18 years when he is released, he will be a different man than the one who bought me. Whether I am still part of his life, that remains to be seen. But what I know is that he will spend every day of those 18 years knowing that the choice he made to confess, to testify, to help dismantle the network will have saved lives. And that matters. That has to matter. Because without the possibility of change, we are all just prisoners of who we have been." That night, Nylah receives a letter from Jisung. Prison mail, censored and stamped. "Nylah, I watched your press conference today on the news. I saw you standing there with your fiancé visible in the background, saw you touch your belly where our child might have been if the world were different, and I understood something I have spent 5 years trying to understand. I bought you. That is a fact that will never change. But you made yourself free. And you used that freedom to free others. That is not redemption for me. That is just proof that I am capable of doing one decent thing. Stepping out of your way. I will spend 18 years in this cell understanding the magnitude of what I took from you and what you chose to build anyway. I will die knowing that I am not the center of your story anymore. You are. That is enough. When I am released, if you wish to never see me again, I will accept that. If you wish to see if redemption is possible, I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of the possibility. But either way, your life, the one you have built, the children you will have, the foundation you have created, the women you have saved, that is your victory, not mine to share. I am proud of you, even though I have no right to be. I love you, even though I have no right to. And I am grateful for every day you chose to believe that I could be better. That gratitude is the closest I will ever come to redemption. Yours in consequence, Jisung. Nylah holds the letter for a long time. She doesn't cry. She is past tears. Instead, she sits on her balcony overlooking the Korean coast, her hand on her child. Her second child, the first one born from choice and love, not coercion and debt. She thinks about the girl she was 5 years ago, standing in a wedding dress she didn't choose, married to a man she didn't know, trapped in a country where no one knew her name. That girl is gone. In her place is a woman who survived not just imprisonment, but the far more difficult task of learning to live freely. A woman who took her pain and transformed it into purpose. A woman who looked into the face of her trafficker and chose not to destroy him but to demand that he become accountable. Not because she forgave him, but because forgiveness was less important than transformation. The sun sets over Seoul in the distance, painting the sky shades of amber and gold. Nylah places her hand on her belly and whispers to the child growing inside her. Your story will be different. You will never have to choose between love and freedom. I will make sure of that. And somewhere in Seoul Detention Center, a man with white hair sits in a prison cell and finally understands what it means to be alive. Not by feeling but by consequence. Not by possession but by release. He will spend 18 years in that cell. And when he is released, he will be different. Not good, but different. And that finally is enough.